encouragement, prayers, and sometimes much-needed coffee. Special thanks to my other sister, Amy, who has been by Julie's side through it all. There's an ancient writing that perhaps sums it up best when it says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me." Thank you to all those who walk through the shadows of adversity, pain, and despair with all of us. It means so much more than words can ever express. And thanks especially to the one who promised to be with us through it all and to never leave us nor forsake us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Certain all members extend their prayers and thoughts to your family, especially to your sister. The honourable member from...
Started question period a little bit late today, so we're going to be a little bit behind.
Airstrikes in Lebanon in recent days. Among them are 2 Canadians. I send my condolences to the loved ones of all those lost. I represent a large Lebanese Canadian community, and they are deeply worried for their family and loved ones. Israeli officials say they are ready for a ground invasion that will kill even more innocent civilians. Civilians are dying in Gaza, in West Bank, and in Lebanon. The violence must end. The Netanyahu government must stop its escalations. Canada's words are not enough. There must be a ceasefire and consequences for Israeli government officials that have expressed support for genocide and violence. A clear and unequivocal 2-way arms embargo with no loopholes. And as part of a 2-state solution, Canada must recognize the Palestinian state now. We must stand for peace.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik, EU. Today is the 25th National School Support Staff Day. Every year, school support staff contribute to student success. They ensure a safe and healthy environment, they support teachers, they help with school administration, and they take care of school facilities. There are more than 80 different jobs divided into 4 broad categories. The first is administrative support. This includes administrative officers, school organization workers, administration and IT technicians, and all those who handle logistics in our school. Second category, manual support, such as caretakers, certified maintenance workers, pipe fitters, and electricians, who keep schools safe for our children. Third category, special education, which includes all those who look after students with special needs. And finally, fourth, daycare services, all educators and support staff in daycares. Thank you to all of these people who work so hard every single day to give all of our children a better future. The Honourable Member for Nickel Belt.
Président, le 25 septembre, l'anniversaire du lever de drapeau franco-ontarien, ici pour la première fois à l'Université de Sept en 1975. Ce drapeau est un symbole de notre histoire, de notre culture et de la fierté que nous ressentons. En tant que secrétaire parlementaire aux langues officielles, je tiens à remercier de nombreux organismes qui travaillent pour faire vivre la francophonie, l'ACFO du Grand Sudbury, les centres de santé, les clubs Richelieu, l'Alliance des femmes de la francophonie, les clubs d'amitié des aînés, le Carrefour francophone. Hier, dans Nickel Belt, nous célébrons la construction d'une nouvelle école catholique à Val-Thérèse qui ouvrira en 2025. Elle accueillera les élèves de l'école Sainte-Thérèse, Notre-Dame, Saint-Joseph de Hanmer. Quelle réussite! J'invite tous les francophones et francophones à célébrer notre langue et à continuer de renforcer notre héritage avec fierté. Merci également à nos alliés anglophones et multilingues pour leur soutien précieux. Bonne célébration à tous.
Bravo.
The Honourable Member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Yesterday, Canadians witnessed the hypocrisy of the Bloc and the NDP as they voted to continue propping up this Prime Minister and his devastating policies. They are content to sit on their hands, allowing this Liberal government to unleash more chaos and suffering on Canadians while they wait to get their pensions. This NDP Liberal coalition has doubled the cost of housing, made it easier for criminals to get back on the street, and allowed the cost of living to skyrocket. No matter how bad it gets for Canadians, the NDP Liberal coalition doesn't care. They know Canadians are fed up, but are refusing to listen. Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let Canadians have their say and call a carbon tax now.
That's right.
The honourable member from Milton.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Today is Sneak It In Day, so Participation is here in Ottawa to remind us all to make room in our busy schedules to sneak in some movement. Movement is medicine. It's preventative medicine for our minds, our bodies, and our communities that keep us all happy, healthy, connected, and strong. A little exercise every day is also great for our moods, productivity, and focus. I'm proud that our government has made physical activity a national priority, reducing healthcare costs and making Canada a healthier place to live, work, learn, and play. Mr. Speaker, sportsmanship in politics was one of the pillars of my campaign, and ensuring that we can all work together in this House of Commons for progress on common ambitions is important to me. I've organized cross-party runs, soccer games, and yesterday all political parties came together to play cricket, because when we play and do healthy activities together, it reminds us that what we have in common is bigger and more important than what we might disagree on. Thanks to Participation for reminding us all that moving Canadians forward will lead to better health and prosperity for all Canadians.
Great job.
The honourable member from Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great sadness that I stand here today to share the loss of Wally Legion Branch 229 President and veteran Tony Moore. Tony was a dedicated advocate for veterans, served as president for as long as I can remember, and he was instrumental in the building of Canada's most modern and full-service veterans facility, the Wally Veterans Village. Opened in 2023, this groundbreaking initiative was launched thanks to Tony's deep understanding of the support veterans truly needed. He tirelessly advocated for the community, ensuring they received the resources and care they deserved. Above all, Tony was a great friend to me, someone who was always frank and forthright. I want to extend my deepest condolences to Tony's family, friends, and all members at the Wally Legion. Tony will be greatly missed, but his legacy of service, compassion, and advocacy will not be forgotten. May he rest in peace.
The honourable member from Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, corruption is up, crime is up, and time is up. Canadians want an election to decide the country's direction and how their money is used. While Canadians line up at food banks and deal with a worsening housing crisis, the Prime Minister decided to use their money to purchase a $9 million luxury condo for his personal friend. This comes at a time when young Canadians are worried that they may never realize the dream of home ownership. But Canadians are not without hope, Mr. Speaker. An election is coming soon. Then Canadians can hold this government accountable for driving up costs while Liberal insiders benefit. Only a Conservative government will cut the carbon tax and end the abuse of tax dollars.
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Laval, Les Îles.
Mr. Speaker, Lebanon is bleeding. The entire country is currently in intensive care unit. The population of the country appeals to the international community to intervene, put an immediate end to the hostilities, and save civilian and innocent lives. Every human being has the right to live in dignity, irrespective of their corner of the globe. Killing innocent civilians is unacceptable on both sides of the border. The hospitals in Lebanon are overstretched and lack the capacity to treat such a massive number of patients. As such, the Lebanese request that our government contribute to demanding an immediate cessation of hostilities and emphasize the need to keep the airport operational. The Lebanese community is hoping that Canada will stand up and champion Canadian values on the global stage. Lebanese people don't want war. Government of Lebanon doesn't want war. We want to live in peace, we want to live in security, and to see peace spread and prevail in all of...
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of this soft on crime coalition, costs are up, taxes are up, crime is up, extortion is up, and now time is up. Extortion has skyrocketed 357% across Canada. It's easy for criminals to commit crimes, get bail, and go out and re-offend again because of this Liberal NDP government's soft on crime policies. In Alberta, extortion is up 409%. Recently in Calgary, disturbing stories have emerged of armed criminals committing extortions and kidnappings against newcomers, children's families, and businesses. The leader of the NDP, the Prime Minister, and both Liberal MPs from Alberta voted against common sense Conservative Bill C-381 on extortions, so they could keep this Liberal NDP Prime Minister in power and protect the NDP leader's $2.2 million pension. Common sense Conservatives are the only party standing up and protecting victims, while this Liberal NDP government has become the party of protecting criminals.
The honourable member from Cypress Hills, Grassland.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Taxes are up for everyone, and in Saskatchewan, our hospitals and schools will pay $380 million in carbon taxes alone. This is money that should be used to hire doctors, nurses, technicians, teachers, and educational assistants. But instead, it is being used to line the pockets of the Prime Minister's elitist friends like Mark Carney. In Saskatchewan, we have seen this act before. The last time there was a radical tax and spend Trudeau as Prime Minister, healthcare took a major hit in my province, with hospitals and clinics being forced to close or reduce services. So yes, Mr. Speaker, time is up. The NDP leader has once again sold out his support to the Prime Minister, just like he did the other 24 times that we voted to axe the tax. If the NDP truly supports healthcare and education, they would end their costly coalition and vote with us to call a carbon tax election just like Canadians want. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, only Conservatives are on Saskatchewan's side, and we will axe the tax for good.
The honourable member from Pierre.
Mr. Speaker, this summer I visited dozens of organizations that receive Canada Summer Jobs funding. 223 youth in our city gained, in our community I should say, gained meaningful jobs through this federal program. 64 organizations received over $1 million investments in our beautiful riding of Pierre. Young Canadians have gained valuable experience and skills through these jobs, through the Canada Summer Jobs program, experiences they will utilize into their careers.
I had the pleasure of visiting and meeting with some key organizations.
SARS and Camp Chaos.
Community pools like Briarwood and Fairview and Elm Park.
The West Island Association for the Intellectually Handicapped, which supports adults with disabilities. Des Banques Alimentaires.
Food banks like On Rock and the West Island Assistance Fund. They help families in need.
Of worship and cultural centers like the Hindu Mandir. These groups are dedicated to supporting youth, to developing our community. Thank you so much for all you do. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, on September 30th, we mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Together, we honor the survivors of residential schools, and we mourn the thousands of children who never returned home. We have a legal and moral obligation to address the ongoing harms to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, to acknowledge what happened in residential schools as genocide, and to facilitate a path for healing. The government must do more. One important step would be to pass the MP from Winnipeg Centre's bill that combats residential school denialism. This year in my riding, constituents will be participating in the annual Reconciliation Ride, hosted by Victoria Orange Shirt Day and Capital Bike. We'll hear from incredible leaders in our community, Diane Sam from the Songhees Nation, and Eddie Charlie, a residential school survivor from Cowichan Tribes, before riding as a group to the South Island Powwow. This year's grand entry will take place at noon and at 6 p.m. Everyone is invited to come celebrate Indigenous cultures and resiliency. Haichka Siem.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. In 2024, this year, the Quebec Advocacy Association for the Rights of Retirees and Pre-Retirees, Granby chapter, is celebrating 40 years of fighting for the rights and the dignity of seniors. The theme to mark their 40th year is 40 years of struggle and commitment together for the rights and dignity of seniors. This is an opportunity to reflect on the progress that has been made while looking to the future with determination. Since its creation, the Granby AQDR has devoted itself to defending and protecting the rights of seniors, fighting injustice and equality with vigor and conviction. Let's celebrate the commitment and solidarity of its members and partners. I'd also like to mention that AQDR is a valuable ally of Bill C-319, which the Bloc is proposing to eliminate the unacceptable inequity created by the government since people 75 and over and people 65 to 74 do not receive the same amount of old age security. Together, let's put an end to this age-based discrimination. Happy 40 years.
The honourable member from Niagara Falls.
Speaker, after 9 years of this costly NDP Liberal coalition, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and their time is up. Through this coalition, the NDP leader has sold out workers and residents in my community, which has resulted in higher taxes, balloon food costs, doubling the housing costs, and unleashed crime and chaos in our once safe streets. Their joint plan to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre will literally drive Canadians to food banks. Yet, sadly, this NTP leader has voted 24 times in support of this tax. And what are the results? Just over 1 million people visited a food bank in Ontario over the past year, an increase of 25%. In my community, Project Share reports that 1 in 8 residents has had to visit a food bank. Speaker, Canadians need a carbon tax election now to decide between this costly coalition of NDP Liberals or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The honourable member from Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise on behalf of Vancouver Quadra constituents to defend carbon pricing. Canadians understand the urgency of reducing carbon emissions to limit their costly, even lethal impacts, such as wildfires and floods, on lands, people, and property. 20 years ago, as BC's Environment Minister, I laid the groundwork for BC's Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which fosters innovation, economic development, and emission reductions through carbon pricing. Canada's national carbon pricing is equally a fair, efficient way to reduce emissions, and like British Columbia's, it works. What's more, 8 of every 10 Canadians under our pricing system get more money back than they pay out. Sadly, Conservative and now NDP leaders reject carbon pricing. Shame on them, working to make carbon pollution free again. Mr. Speaker, we must price it to reduce it.
When Jagmeet freaked out that day, he proved quite a bit about himself, that he is not capable of running a country, let alone a party in this country. He fucking freaked out like a child, and that is not somebody we need anywhere near a leadership position in our country.
Or else I would remove questions from him during question period today. Having not received such a commitment on his part, and the member having not withdrawn his comments, I will therefore remove 3 questions from the Leader of the Official Opposition in the opening round today.
Wait, what?
Chers collègues.
Colleagues, as I've indicated in my ruling earlier today, the Chair has offered the Leader of the Official Opposition the opportunity to make amends regarding the words he used last week, or else I would remove questions from him during question period today. Having not received such a commitment on his part, and the member having not withdrawn his comments, I will therefore remove 3 questions from the Official Opposition Leader.
Based on what comments?
Questions. Questions orales. L'honorable. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition. Mr. Speaker, who could be against the following motion that given that for 9 years the government has doubled housing costs, taxed food, punished work, unleashed crime, and is the most centralizing government in Canadian history, the House has lost confidence in the government and offers Canadians the option to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader has a major problem. He claims to be the greatest expert in the world on monetary policy, but he didn't even read the beginning of the first chapter of Economics 101, which says that the basic rule to avoid inflation and to have the central bank reduce inflation is to not interfere with the central bank. When is he going to apologize for being both an expert and the most incompetent of all the monetarists in the world?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
At least someone over there thinks about monetary policy. Mr. Speaker, who could be against the following motion? That, given that, after 9 years, the government has doubled housing costs, taxed food, punished work, unleashed crime, and is the most centralizing government in Canadian history, the House has lost confidence in the government and offers Canadians the option to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
Cheers to that.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a very simple answer to his question as to who's opposed to that motion. Canadians.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie.
Thanks for stopping by.
The Liberals have until October 29th to improve OAS for those aged 74 and under and to protect supply management. They need to pass Bill C-319 and Bill C-282. Why these two measures? Well, first of all, because it's good for Quebecers, but also there's consensus in this House. The Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP have already agreed to this. So why leave Quebecers waiting when we could make gains for Quebec? Will the government meet our demands for seniors and farmers? Yes or no?
What comments did Pierre make that he got 3 questions taken away from him?
For seniors. Mr. Speaker, the member for La Prairie is very, very behind when it comes to support for seniors. He voted against every measure that's been taken in this House, supported by members to help.
Oh, okay. So
the most vulnerable seniors in Canada. And I would like to know, for La Prairie, what does he say to the 6,200 people in his own riding who have joined the federal dental care program? What does he say to them when they ask him why he voted against that?
So, did Jagmeet get kicked out then? What about him? He's the one who literally instigated it.
They're going to have to ask a lot of questions next year, Mr. Speaker. So, next October 29th, maybe, instead of playing partisan games, this government should get to work. The Bloc Québécois demands are clear.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Quebec is literally just for themselves. Whenever they speak, they don't say Canadians, they say Quebecers. It's always about Quebec this and Quebec that. They don't want to actually be a part of Canada at all. I don't know why we still have them as part of the country, but that's just me.
And swords. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, the Bloc Québécois and other members in this House can choose to sabotage the efforts of the Canadian government to help seniors in his own riding. 7,400 seniors in his riding have signed up, and many of them are receiving for the first time, or the first time in many years, dental care. Accessible, affordable dental care, investing in housing. Does he really want to associate with the Conservative leader who says that Quebec's municipalities are incompetent and who wants to tear up our agreement with Quebec? The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, Pascal, a single mother from Hull, wrote in an open letter, "I don't think I'll ever be able to buy a house. I'm afraid that my youngest child will never be able to own her own home. I can't change apartments. Rent has gone up so much since I moved in, and the housing costs in my neighborhood have gone up by over 150%. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals and the Conservatives themselves caused this housing crisis. Why do they want people like Pascal to pay the price? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I'd like to thank my colleague.
That's the most lame thing ever. Polyev gets fucking taxed on his questions due to Jagmeet's fucking response to something he said and did. God, this is brutal, man. And Trudeau isn't gonna get any sort of, I say tax, but I mean, he's not gonna get questions removed away or anything like that based off of how he reacted yesterday. I mean, come on, man. What a fucking double standard there is in the House of Commons right now. And we got to get a new speaker. Greg clearly cannot control this house properly. You just listen to him speak. He's so fucking passive-aggressive.
The Liberals promised to deliver an urban, rural, and northern housing strategy. 2 years later, still no funding and still no shovels in the ground. Delay, delay, broken promise after broken promise. That's the Liberal way. Meanwhile, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people continue to live in moldy, overcrowded conditions or on the street. Why do the Liberals keep Indigenous people waiting for the homes they need now?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
I am so proud to be part of a government that understands by Indigenous for Indigenous housing, and that's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, by launching the $4 billion urban, rural, and northern housing strategy. Already $300 million has been dispensed through an organization led by Indigenous leaders, determining how best to use those funds so that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people have the kinds of housing and supports they need in every city in this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Months ago, I asked the government who could be against a motion pointing out that this government's doubled housing costs, tax food, punish work, and unleash crime to give Canadians the chance to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. And she said, Canadians are against all of those things. If that's the case, then why won't she let them decide in a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a little sad that the Leader of the Opposition, having just lost a vote of non-confidence in the government yesterday, is putting forward the exact same motion today. I think it shows his desperation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, in fact, the motion specifically demonstrates that this government, this NDP Liberal government, has doubled housing costs. I found it interesting that the NDP has now discovered that they doubled housing costs. A second ago, a Montreal MP stood up to point to a young woman, Pascal, who can no longer afford to rent, much less to own, after housing costs have tripled in that city. When I was housing minister, rent was $700 in Montreal, and we built almost 200,000 units. Mr. Speaker, why can't the NDP put their actions where their words are and vote for a carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
These slogans are clever, but they are empty, Mr. Speaker. It's empty rhetoric on the other side as always. In fact, he should take a look at the CMHC's report from today that puts a spotlight on Montreal, 106% increase in rental construction. Why is that, Mr. Speaker? Because GST has been waived by this government to ensure greater supply, to incent builders during a difficult time. He has no idea how to incent that sector. He's good at running around the country and insulting mayors, putting a spotlight on the homeless, but coming up with no ideas on that. It's more right-wing populism. They have nothing to say, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
In a carbon tax election, if that's true. Malheureusement,
Unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois is telling Quebecers, wait. If you can't pay your bills, just wait. If you can't buy a home, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, just hang on. If you're afraid of going out on the street because of crime that the Bloc Liberals have unleashed in our streets, in Quebec, a province that is at a breaking point because of immigration, they're just saying, hang on. Quebecers don't need to wait. They don't need to wait, Mr. Speaker. They need to choose a new government based on good common sense. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the priority of our government is to deliver for all Quebecers and all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That includes daycare spaces, a dental care program, historic housing investments, Mr. Speaker. In the meantime, what are the Conservatives concentrated on? Well, as we saw in the Journal de Montréal this week, Conservative MPs are being paid to go to Florida to sermonize on the importance of banning abortion and teaching creationism. You can't invent that, Mr. Speaker. They should be ashamed.
Even though members are not recognized on the floor and they shouldn't be speaking
Oh,
on the
here
floor.
we go again.
I always invite them to be very mindful of the accusations that they make to other members. The honourable member from Kenora.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. People across Northern Ontario are struggling to fill their gas tanks. Young professionals cannot find an affordable place to live, and our communities are less safe. Mr. Speaker, these are all reasons why Canadians deserve a carbon tax election where they can vote for our common sense plan. But the NDP continue to support this government, Mr. Speaker, denying Canadians that opportunity. Why is this Prime Minister so afraid of facing a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
They want to take away the rebate to Canadians. They'll have to explain that to Canadians, Mr. Speaker. What they'll also have to explain at some point, Mr. Speaker, is that they lost 800,000 affordable homes when they were in office. That minister, former Minister of Housing, who's now the Leader of the Opposition, went around, had no plan on housing, never mentioned homelessness once, and when it came time to vote in favor of ensuring zoning changes at the local level through federal dollars that would incent that change, he voted against. They all did. They don't care about those young people that the member just mentioned. They never cared. It's more right-wing populism, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Bloc Québécois showed its true colours by putting this Liberal Prime Minister on life support. They voted for a centralizing government that has a terrible record when it comes to public safety. Since 2015 in Quebec, the number of auto thefts has gone up by 185%. Violent firearms offences are up by 146%. Do the government of the Bloc recognize that their policies have created a major public safety problem across the country and specifically in Quebec?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the investments we're making to make our communities safe. In fact, we are moving forward on banning some of the most dangerous weapons, over 1,500 assault-style weapons that are designed to kill. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives get upset because they're sent here to do the work of the gun lobby instead of keeping Canadians safe, in particular women who are disproportionately affected by gun violence. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame for Conservatives to stand up while voting against these measures.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Violence with firearms is up by 181%. But it's not hunters, it's street gangs with guns that are coming across the border. The money that's being invested should be at
Finally,
the border.
somebody's actually saying it.
Will do. How can this government explain this weakness, and why are they still attacking hunters?
Let's go. Good shit.
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I would invite my colleague to be honest with Quebecers because he knows very well that it's not the weapons of hunters that are being banned. It's assault weapons that are designed for war, Mr. Speaker, and which are being used by street gangs to murder. And my colleague should know very well that the first victims, they're the main victims of gun violence across Canada and in Quebec are women. So if he's against our assault weapon ban, that's particularly shameful, particularly in Quebec after Polytechnique. The honourable member for Shefford. Quebecers have told us time and time again they're worried about the cost of living and living conditions for seniors. That's why we presented our ultimatum for October 29th. The Liberals don't have the right to abandon seniors aged 65 to 74 given the rising cost of living. They need to end the two classes of senior citizenship that they've created. They need to stop discriminating against seniors, and they have until October 29th to do it. Are they going to meet our demand, or will they continue to defend this terrible record to voters? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, 14,600 seniors who are who live in my colleague's riding are today benefiting from the federal Canadian dental care program in her riding of Shefford. And yet she risen in this House several times to vote against vulnerable seniors in her riding who are currently benefiting from this program and who are saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Why, Mr. Speaker?
Then I have
the honourable member for Shefford. Well, that's not the question, and the Liberals are going to soon realize that October 29th is coming quickly. In the meantime, can they show a sign of good faith to seniors and community organizations who are working with seniors? The Liberals can commit to agree with the Government of Quebec and stop holding back funds for the Bien Vieillir Chez Soi program. It's unacceptable that a fight created by the federal government to interfere in Quebec's jurisdiction is hurting organizations that are helping Quebec's seniors. Will they come to an agreement with Quebec and stop holding seniors hostage? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. And that's not all. That's not all, Mr. Speaker. When we brought back the age of retirement from 67 to 65 years, what did the member and her colleagues do? They voted against that, Mr. Speaker. When we increased the guaranteed income supplement, a federal program that has helped hundreds of thousands of vulnerable seniors, the Bloc and my colleague from Shefford voted against that. We increased OAS for vulnerable seniors. She and her colleagues voted against that, Mr. Speaker.
Then I have
the honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. It's an ultimatum. Bill C-282 on supply management must be passed before October 29th. It should be simple. The House of Commons voted in favour of it, but it's been stuck in the Senate for over a year. Yesterday in committee, a senator asked an excellent question. And I quote, "Can you please explain how it is that this bill has been stuck in the Senate? It was supported by the vast majority of members of the democratically elected House." Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has appointed 80% of the senators. Is he going to tell them that it's time to move this bill forward?
Then I have
the Honourable Minister.
Culture and Agri-Food.
Merci, Mr. President. Our government, of course, supports supply management. A honourable colleague is well aware that we supported Bill C-282 because, of course, we have and always will support supply management. Unlike the Conservatives who fell shamefully behind when important funding for supply management came towards the House and they voted against it. I think my honourable colleague is fully aware we have and will continue to support supply management. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Sarnia-Lambton.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The NDP leader made a big deal about tearing up the supply agreement with the Liberals and then flip-flop by voting to keep this Prime Minister in power.
That's right.
The NDP leader needs to end the costly coalition with the Liberals. People can't afford to eat. Ontario food banks just posted an 8-year high in usage. Canadians need a carbon tax election. Why is the Prime Minister so afraid to have one?
The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we all suffer when we know that there are fellow Canadians that are struggling. We've made historic investments as a government to ensure that our social security net is strong for Canadians. Whether that's in $10 a day childcare, Mr. Speaker, whether that's restoring the retirement age to 65, Mr. Speaker, but let's not pretend that the Conservatives really care about helping Canadians, because if they did, they would be supporting these important measures that are helping.
The honourable member from Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, here's what they've really done. This NDP Liberal coalition has doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, taxed food, punished work, and unleashed crime in our streets. So instead of selling out Canadians by keeping this Prime Minister in power, the NDP leader needs to vote with common sense Conservatives for a carbon tax election. Why not let Canadians decide whether they want to have the carbon tax hiked by 61 cents a litre by the Liberals, or whether they want a government that's going to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the question is, why are the Conservatives so desperate for an election right now? Because they want to make sure they get out before Canadians understand that they have a hidden agenda. But, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are much smarter than that. When the Conservatives say one thing and do another, Canadians know. We trust Canadians. When will Conservatives start trusting them?
The honourable member from Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The Saskatchewan Premier said the carbon tax is, quote, costing Saskatchewan's health and education systems nearly $380 million. That's money that could be used for more teachers, more doctors, and more nurses. This NDP Liberal carbon tax is literally taking away teachers and nurses from Saskatchewan. Shame on the NDP for supporting this tired Liberal government. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister wants to cut teachers and nurses in Saskatchewan, why won't he call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I would encourage my Conservative colleagues to actually use facts. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. It is an affordability measure. People who live on modest incomes actually benefit significantly. It's also an important way of fighting climate change. And if he wants to quote Scott Moe, I would say when Scott Moe appeared here in Ottawa and talked about the price on pollution, he said he looked at doing something else and everything else was too expensive. So he wasn't going to do anything to fight climate change. I guess that's the answer of the Conservative Party of Canada.
I'm sorry, but like $140 every 3 months is not enough to cover anything within a week of those 3 months.
Games have found themselves on the hook for medical insurance. This comes as a shock since all serving military members have theirs covered under the Canadian Armed Forces. The Liberals created this mess, and now this one veteran has had their life change after a serious injury provided during the previous games. Will the minister admit to this mistake and extend medical coverage to all Canadian Invictus athletes for the upcoming Whistler Games, or will they continue to ignore the needs of veterans?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Invictus Games offers a very unique rehabilitation opportunity to ill and injured veterans and also for members of the Canadian Armed Forces. It is also important to make sure that the well-being of veterans is taken care of during the Games and also after the Games. That is why that we will continue to work with the Canadian Armed Forces, Soldier On, Invictus Games, and other stakeholders to ensure that the well-being of our veterans is always taken care of, and want to ensure this situation will be rectified before Invictus Games 2025. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, young Canadians are in survival mode, and rates of anxiety and depression have gone through the roof with the high cost of living and youth unemployment. Many are struggling just to meet their basic needs, like food and shelter, making paying for therapy out of pocket seem like a luxury. The Liberals promise to ensure mental health is treated as a full and equal part of Canada's universal public health care system, but they have failed to deliver. When will the government finally get serious about the mental health crisis and ensure all Canadians can access the mental health care they need when they need it?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for his question, and I say as the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, but also as a mother to 2 teenage daughters, that is exactly why in 2024, in this year's budget, we pledged $500 million towards the Youth Mental Health Fund, Mr. Speaker, working with community service organizations across this country, youth-led for youth in every community across this country. We want to meet young people where they're at to get the supports and the services that they need and that they deserve. This is the future of our country, and we are going to take care of them so that we build a stronger Canada together.
What about all the people who are addicted to stuff right now that you're giving drugs to in those quote-unquote safe injection sites?
And being there for its allies. The world was rightly shocked when the Conservative Party repeatedly voted against Ukraine. But Canadians were shocked once again this week when the Deputy Conservative leader disparaged and personally attacked the German State Secretary for saying that climate change is real and Europe wants to buy clean Canadian energy. Can the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources share with this House how Canada is supporting our European allies like Germany?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Yeah,
and Energy.
the carbon tax rebate is quarterly, and I get like $140. It's not even enough to cover one tank of gas, and they're trying to say this over and over again that it supports 8 out of 10 Canadians. I want to talk to 8 out of 10 Canadians and see how much they actually get.
Providing clean hydrogen
It's
and critical
fucking
minerals.
wild.
We said yes and worked with them on the way, and the Conservatives simply bullied German officials publicly. Providing clean energy to the world is something that will benefit Canada from a prosperity and jobs perspective, but also will enable us to help our allies around the world. The Conservative rhetoric is going to cost Canada its friends. It's going to cost Canada jobs.
Uh-oh. Greg is not too happy about that one. Here we go.
I know all honourable members get passionate when it comes to questions and answers here, but we must make sure that we show fundamental respect for all members. I know the honourable member from Calgary, Signal Hill, is a veteran of this and other places, and I'm certain he knows which way to make sure that the language is appropriate. The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and now tariffs are up. With softwood lumber tariffs doubling to 14.5%. Well, what's happened? Today, the Resolute Forest Products announced the closure of the Forestry and Maniwaki, Quebec sawmills, costing 280 jobs because of the tariffs. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said this was a small issue. Can the Prime Minister explain why the loss of 280 jobs is a small issue, or is he just a soft Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade and Export Promotion.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member that that the forestry sector and the workers, particularly in this sector, are tremendously important to our communities across the country. They are dedicated workers that give their all. But as you know, as we have said, these punishing tariffs are unjustified. We've said this in the United States. In fact, indeed, I know that the United States care about building affordable homes just as we do, and these tariffs, if they were to get rid of them, will actually help us
And
build
you're
affordable
sitting
homes
there
in this country
letting
and in the
them
United States.
do whatever the fuck they
The
want.
Honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
They're not strong enough.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian softwood lumber producers have already paid $9 billion more because of these excess
Holy
tariffs since
shit,
2017. But you know what else they pay? The carbon tax. Right. The carbon tax costs hundreds of millions of dollars more that makes it uncompetitive to the U.S. industry. But you know what the irony is? This industry plants trees. Last year alone, they planted 440 million trees, while this government's $2 billion tree program barely got off the ground. Isn't it time for a new common sense minister who's going to axe the tax, stand up for Canadians?
God, we need to
and
get rid
fight
of the
for
carbon
400,000
tax. It needs to go so fucking badly.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Mr. Speaker, the question is yet another example of the Conservative Party not doing its homework and not learning the facts. As I say, on a residential basis, 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. It is an affordability measure and an effective way to fight climate change. In terms of the plant that he is talking about, it is based in Quebec, which has its own cap and trade system. They do not pay the price on pollution.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Leflore. Mr. Speaker, this morning we learned that the Morrissey sawmill and in Maniwaki too, they'll be closing their mills. 280 workers are going to lose their jobs. And this is not the end of it. More sawmills will be closed down as the Environment Minister imposes this order that will kill a minimum of 1,400 jobs. Why do the Liberals always fail to help out forestry workers? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I know that on the Conservative benches, they don't really like science or researchers and so on, but I will quote from Louis Bélanger, a professor from Laval University, who said recently that the need for the emergency order is clear. The government is simply applying the law in the absence of an effective provincial strategy to protect this species. Another expert said that the Government of Canada's emergency order is justified and measured, especially from the point of view of science. Here on this side, Mr. Speaker, we're pro-science. The honourable member for Forestry. Mr. Speaker, the workers in the forestry industry in Quebec work hard, but they are always being punished by a Liberal government propped up by the Bloc. This is a threat to 1,400 jobs, and it's still pending because the Bloc is propping up the Liberal government. We are pro-region. The Bloc is no longer a party of the regions, and we saw that recently with their election of a member in Montreal. What's it going to take for this to change? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the people I represent. I'm a member for Montreal, but perhaps the member opposite should speak to forestry workers in Quebec who said to me, and they've said in a number of public commissions, that the future of the industry and the forest depends on the health of the forests, which the Conservative Party of Canada seems incapable of understanding. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Quebec City is the cradle of the French language in the Americas, but the Governor General has cancelled her visit to the Pignon Bleu because she doesn't understand French 3 years after promising to learn it. The Pignon Bleus, their preparations for Ms. Simon's visit, were all for nothing. The Pignon Bleus simply thought they'd be able to express themselves in their own language, French. But Ms. Simon remains incapable of showing them this basic respect. How can the Liberals find that acceptable and justifiable? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government remains firmly committed to protecting the French language here in Canada. It's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that Her Excellency, the Governor-General, has not had the opportunity to learn. She didn't get the chance to learn French when she was young because of discrimination, and yet she's the first Indigenous woman to hold the position. She speaks an Indigenous language that she's very proud of. We expect her to continue studying French. Linguistic duality is at the core of our identity as Canadians. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. La Pointe de l'Île, rather. The Governor General has had 3 years to learn French. Taxpayers have even paid for $28,000 worth of lessons. Obviously, she's not trying hard enough. But why would she? She's already got the job. History is repeating itself for Francophones. Today we're talking about Mary Simon, but it was the same thing when Air Canada hired Michael Rousseau. Will the Liberals finally admit that when they appoint Anglophones who promise to learn French, the joke's on Francophones? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a bilingual country, and Canadians expect their leaders to be able to express themselves in both official languages. The Governor-General was unable to learn French when she was young because of discrimination in Canada at the time. We expect her to continue her studies and her learning of French because linguistic duality goes to the heart of our identity as Canadians, proud of our bilingualism here in Canada.
The honourable member from Oxford.
9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and now visits to Cambridge food banks are also up, nearly 20%. The Liberals' carbon tax scam has forced our seniors and our families to rely on food banks for their survival. The NDP continue to prop up their political masters and deny Canadians that carbon tax election they so desperately want. Why is the Prime Minister so afraid of a carbon tax election, and why won't he call one now?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to talk about the childcare numbers that are up, Mr. Speaker. Just last week, we saw Comox Valley Schools announce a new childcare facility with 108 new spots for children there, Mr. Speaker. We also heard in Winnipeg, the Splash Childcare Centre, an additional 40 new spots for children. That's 248 new spots for kids here in our country. High quality, affordable care. That's what's up, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Langley-Aldergrove.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Yet the NDP leader and his colleagues voted yesterday to keep the Prime Minister in power so that he can quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, the carbon tax that drives up the cost of everything and is driving a record number of British Columbians to food banks. Why is this Prime Minister so afraid of a carbon tax election? Why won't he let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday what we saw is that the House voted non-confidence in the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Yes.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, we can no longer wait after 9 years of this Prime Minister with the Liberal Bloc coalition. 72% of young people feel that they're less well off than the previous generation. The Liberal Bloc coalition is supporting a government that turns its back on young people. A government that, when are they going to build? Why not let them vote for a government that will build housing and fix the budget? Honourable Minister, thank you. Mr. Speaker, what's good for Quebecers, what's not good for Quebecers and including young ones, is the insults and petty partisanship that the Conservative leader does day in, day out. And he knocks investments that young Quebecers need. The Conservative leader not only calls everyone incompetent, but he also would rip up the deal we signed with the government of Quebec, $1.8 billion to build tens of thousands of affordable housing units in Quebec. All members on both sides, please order. The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellant. Mr. Speaker, our government has introduced a plan to build 25,000 new homes on federal Crown land by 2031. The Conservative leader and his housing plan would see federal buildings sold off to the highest builder with no guarantee of affordable housing. Can the Minister of Public Works explain to the people of Alfred Pellant how federal lands will be used to create affordable housing all across the country? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Mr. Speaker, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It takes a second hand to count the number of units, affordable units, that were built under the Conservative leader's tenure as Minister responsible for housing. That is incompetence for you. We have created 8,000 affordable housing units all across Quebec. And so we don't need any lectures from Conservatives.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
9 years of the Simple NDP Soft on Crime Coalition, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, extortions up, times up. In Calgary, disturbing stories emerged of armed criminals committing extortions and kidnappings against families and businesses. This Liberal NDP coalition voted against Conservative Deputy Leader Bill C-381 to crack down on extortions. Instead, the coalition made it easier for criminals to get bail and reoffend. Why is the freedom of criminals more important to this government than protecting extortion victims?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, every single measure that we've made, including investing in police to combat guns and gang units, guess what, Mr. Speaker? Conservatives voted against and are against. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, when they were in power, they actually cut the CBSA, the RCMP, who did this very work, who worked with our provincial and municipal counterparts in policing. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to addressing crime, Conservatives are all about cuts and slogans, and we're about action.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, 9 years ago, we warned the government about joining the Beijing-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and so did the Obama-Biden administration. Last year, news about the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration of the bank forced the government to initiate a boycott and to begin a review. The boycott is now 15 months, and Canada still has its shares, and Beijing still has the nearly $250 million that this government gave the bank. So, when will the government release the review, dump the shares, and get the money back?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as soon as the Minister heard about these very serious allegations, she took action. The Minister announced an immediate halt, Mr. Speaker, to all Canadian government-led activity at the bank while we conducted a review of the allegations. In December, we announced an expansion of that review in partnership with some of our closest international partners. The Department of Finance continues to review the matter, as well as Canadians' participation in the organization. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good. The Honourable Member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, time's up. The Minister of Environment says he's proud of his preparations for the catastrophic Jasper wildfire, but 1/3 of Jasper was destroyed, $1 billion in damages, and 2,000 people are homeless. This isn't something to be proud of, and yet this is the record of failure that this NDP party supports. Banff, Lake Louise, and Jasper are still in danger. It's time for this minister to take responsibility for his failure so we can prepare for the next fire. Will he?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, this member should be ashamed of himself. They have deliberately taken out of context emails between Parks Canada officials who were debating which measures to use to fight fires as opposed to not fighting fires at all. One of those Parks Canada employees has received death threats.
Oh my God.
Since they put this online, they should be ashamed of themselves, Mr. Speaker.
Oh my God.
Crying about death threats online when thousands of Canadians lost their homes due to the fire, and they did such a piss-poor job at stopping it. Unbelievable.
It is World Contraceptive Day, an important day to remember that too often contraception is not accessible due to political ideology. On this side of the House, we proudly supported Pharmacare, which is providing free contraception to Canadians. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction please tell this House what else the government is doing to expand access to universal contraceptives and support the right of women to choose across Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, we will always defend the freedom for a woman's right to choose. Conservatives time and again have shown they will claw back women's rights, from presenting backdoor legislation to prevent access to abortion services, or voting against a woman's freedom of access to contraceptives. We will never let politicians dictate what a woman can and can't do with their bodies, certainly not fly to Florida on all expense paid trips to meet with anti-choice politicians. They need to be honest with Canadians about their hidden agenda, because we stand on this side for women's rights.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
Canadians are appalled
by the Liberals' failure to help family members in Gaza get to safety and reunite with their loved ones here in Canada. From the beginning, the government's initiative was marred in red tape and roadblocks. Precious time was wasted and loved ones continue to be killed. Israel's brutal siege and bombardment continue and is further escalating in the region. What concrete action has this government taken to ramp up diplomatic efforts and collaborate with NGOs on the ground to help bring loved ones to safety?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we can all agree as a House the best way to make sure that Gazans are safe is to make sure that there is a ceasefire so that we can continue to work with people to get the people here that have connections to family members that are looking to be reunited with them. We will continue as a government to work with the authorities on the ground, whether we agree with their positions or not, to make sure those people are kept safe, and we'll continue to work to make sure those people get to Canada in an expeditious fashion. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, education is a provincial domain. Still, MPs would agree the safety of children is a concern for all Canadians. Does the government support Ontario's criticism of the abhorrent action of the Toronto District School Board using students as pawns for a foreign protest that hijacked learning about Indigenous peoples and their efforts to get clean water? Mr. Speaker, activist teachers on a TDSB-sanctioned field trip compromised the safety of children and violated the trust of parents. Will the government stand up to deceit and hatred?
Remind all members, please not take the floor where they're not recognized. The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a question for the Ontario government. But on this side of the House, what we've been focused on is ensuring that every Indigenous child in this country has a fair chance to succeed in their educational journey. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, what we saw when we took office 10 years ago was a chronic underfunding of First Nations education systems, so that education rates were appalling across this country, leading to First Nations students not being able to reach their full potential. We've changed that, Mr. Speaker, and we're proud of that.
And so brings to an end another oral question.
Alrighty. There goes another question period. I believe question period is early on Fridays, and I don't think really much happens on those Fridays, so I will not be covering it. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. If you're still here, hit that like button, hit that sub button. I believe this is also the last question period, other than tomorrow, but this is pretty much it until next month. I don't know when. Let's take a look. Oh no, question period is back in about 3 days. 3-4 days. So, I will be live for that. Looks like there's a lot of questions periods in October, leading into November and into December. So, I'll see you guys for the next one. Have a good one.